It's the midweek edition of the program. Thank you for joining us. I'm Chimeze Obi-Wagu. Coming up, the World Economic Forum opens in Davos with calls for cooperation and collaboration against the backdrop of rising inequality. The World Food Programme raises concern about food security in Southern Africa, where an estimated 14 million people are facing hunger. Plus, oil price fall continue to rattle global market. Well, we'll begin in Asia, where shares in Japan fell to their lowest level since October 2014 today, as investor sentiment continued to be rattled by oil prices and concerns over growth in China. The Nikkei 225 closed down 3.71% at 16,416.19 points. In China, markets were also down after a positive day on Tuesday. Markets in Hong Kong and on the mainland had welcomed China's latest growth numbers, which were in line with expectations. However, the Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index was down 3.44% at 18,960.99 points in afternoon trade, while the mainland Shanghai Composite was down 1.21% at 2,971.56. In South Korea, the benchmark Kospi Index closed down 2.34% at 1,845.45, in line with the rest of the region. Well, from oil price falls to a slowdown in China, there are also questions around the impact of interest rate policies. And just yesterday, the Bank of England governor says he's not ready to increase rates. So there could be divergence of interest rates, which again has implications on the markets. Let me talk to my colleague at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange, Olaf Krieger, to know how these pieces of news are playing out in the market. Hello, Olaf. Oil has fallen 2 to 3% on surplus worries as U.S. oil dropped towards $27. What's happening to the DAX now over this?
Well, the German market is deep in minus, as you can see behind us. The German top shares are in the meantime more than 3% in the negative territories, because there are still the concerns you mentioned that already, especially the oil price, and it goes on. And U.S. crude oil tumbled down below $28 per barrel in Asia after the International Energy Agency warned that the oil market could drown in this oversupply situation. So this is still a big concern. And another analyst said we are now outside fundamentals, and for that reason it's very difficult, if not impossible, to forecast when it will stop. When markets panic, they become unpredictable.
Now let's look at the IMF economic report that downgraded its forecast for global economic growth. Now, in that report, only 3 large advanced economies are forecast to beat 2% growth this year. That's the UK, US, and one of the Eurozone's crisis-hit nations, Spain. How has this piece of news affected investors' confidence?
Well, this is a big concern, not even in Frankfurt, on the stock markets all over the world. And as you might know, we had another roller coaster day all over the world on the stock markets, even here in Frankfurt. And again, the concerns are the IMF, are the oil price, and the bad forecast finally of the International Monetary Union is another thing, is another blow for the markets around the world. And something has to be rebound as soon as possible to stop this, but actually it doesn't look like.
Well, Bank of England's governor says not yet for a rate increase. How is the market chewing Kearney's first speech of the year?
The first reaction was the pound fell to a nearly 7-year low against the dollar after Bank of England Governor Mark Carney said it was too early to lift Britain's record low interest rate. Carney cited weak global growth and low inflation for maintaining the status quo. This is clearly a dovish speech by the governor, and it can only full believe that the Bank of England will not be raised interest rates before the late 2016. Back to you.
Right, thank you very much, Olaf. Well, that was Olaf Krieger, DWTV Channels TV correspondent at the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. When we return after the break, World Economic Forum opens in Davos. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Well, the World Economic Forum in the Swedes ski resort town of Davos has formally opened with calls for cooperation and collaboration against the backdrop of rising inequality and crisis in Europe and the Middle East. Around 2,500 participants from more than 100 countries, including 1,500 business leaders and more than 40 heads of states and government, will be attending the annual meeting, which runs from January 20, that's today, to 23.
The participants face an increasingly divided world, with the poor falling further behind the super-rich and political fissures in the United States, Europe and the Middle East running deeper than at any time in decades. Anti-poverty charity Oxfam on Monday reported that just 62 people, 53 of them men, own as much wealth as the poorest half of the entire world population. Similarly, the richest 1% own more than the other 99% combined. Significantly, the wealth gap is widening faster than anyone anticipated, with the 1% overtaking the rest 1 year earlier than Oxfam had predicted only a year ago. But the divisions go far beyond those that exist between the haves and the have-nots. In the Middle East, the divide between Shiites and Sunnis has reached crisis point, with Iran and Saudi Arabia jostling openly for influence in a region reeling from war and the barbarism of Islamic extremists. The conflicts there have spilled over into Europe, causing deep ideological rifts over how to handle the worst refugee crisis since World War II, and with Britain threatening to leave the European Union, raising doubts about the future of Europe's six-decade push towards closer integration. In his opening speech, World Economic Forum chairman and founder Klaus Schwab did not mention any of these issues, but rather focused on the need for dialogue and cooperation and paid tribute to young global leaders.
We are here, leaders from all walks of the life, political leaders, business leaders, our partners and our members, but also I would like to welcome the representatives of civil society, particularly also the young people. We feel, with a median age of 27 in the world, young people have to be engaged. So I welcome particularly our young global leaders, our global shapers, and our social entrepreneurs.
Schwab added that the Davos event was more than just a conference.
Davos is not just an event, it's not just a conference, it is an experience. And I have three wishes. When you leave, the first wish, I hope you have made many friends here, and friends particularly from other countries, bridge building. Second, I hope that you go home with one transformative idea, not just for your company, but for yourself. And finally, I hope you go home and you are, as myself and all my colleagues, convinced that the future of our small global village can only be well managed if there is as much dialogue, collaboration and cooperation.
Among the key figures in Davos will be the United States Vice President Joe Biden, Secretary of State John Kerry, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the foreign ministers of both Iran and Saudi Arabia.